She was kidnapped at 7 years old, sold 5 times, beaten every single day for 3 years. They carved 114 patterns into her skin with a razor and poured salt in the wounds. But that little girl whose name was stolen became a saint who said she would kiss the hands of her torturers. This is the story of Josephine Bakhita, the slave who forgave everything. 1869, Darfur region, Sudan. A little girl plays in a village called Olgossa. Her uncle is a tribal chief. Her family is relatively prosperous. She has several brothers and sisters. She's loved, protected, safe. She runs through the village, plays with friends, helps her mother with daily tasks. Life is simple. Life is good. She doesn't know that in a few years, she won't even remember her own name. She doesn't know that Arab slave traders are coming. She doesn't know her childhood is about to end in the most brutal way possible. 2 years before her own kidnapping, something terrible happens. Her older sister is taken, snatched by slave traders while walking through the countryside. The family is devastated. They search, they mourn, they never find her. The little girl who would become Bakhita watches her parents grieve. She doesn't understand yet that the same fate awaits her. Around 1877, when she's only 7 or 8 years old, slave traders strike again. She's playing with a friend outside the village. 2 men appear, strangers. One man carries a gun. The other carries chains. They grab here, her friend runs. The little girl screams. Nobody comes. The men move fast. Within minutes, she's miles from home, walking at gunpoint into a nightmare that will last 12 years. The trauma is so severe, so complete, that her own name disappears from her memory, gone, erased by terror. When people ask her name later, she can't remember. She searches her mind. Nothing, just blank space where her identity used to be. The slavers give her a new name, Bakhita. It means fortunate one, lucky one. Blessed one in Arabic, bitter irony, cruel joke. There's nothing fortunate about what's coming. They force her to walk, barefoot, 600 miles. From Darfur to El-Obeid. Hundreds of kilometers across burning sand and rocky terrain. Feet bleeding, blisters bursting. No rest! Constant hunger, constant thirst. The sun beats down mercilessly. At night, the desert cold bites through her thin clothes. She's bought and sold twice before even reaching El-Obeid. Passed from hand to hand like merchandise, like cattle, like an object with a price tag. She learns quickly. Disobedience means beating. Crying means beating. Looking the wrong way means beating. She learns to be silent, to be invisible, to survive. In El-Obeid, a rich Arab buys her. She works as a maid for his 2 daughters. They're close to her age. Sometimes they treat her almost like a playmate. Almost. But she's never allowed to forget her place. She's property. She serves. She obeys. For a while, compared to the journey, this is bearable. Then she accidentally offends one of the owner's sons. Nobody remembers what she did. Maybe nothing. Maybe he was just angry. He lashes her, kicks her, beats her so severely she can't move from her straw bed for over a month. Ribs possibly broken. Body covered in bruises. Every breath hurts. Every movement agony. The family brings a doctor, not out of compassion, but because damaged property has less value. She's maybe 9 years old. She learns another lesson. Even kindness from masters is conditional, fragile, can disappear in an instant. Then comes the worst master, a Turkish general stationed in Kordofan. His name isn't recorded. Maybe Bakhita blocked it from her memory. Maybe she chose not to speak it. What happens during those 3 years under his control is almost unspeakable. Bakhita would later say, carefully choosing her words with precision, She doesn't remember a single day without being beaten. Not one. Let that sink in. 3 years, over 1,000 days. Every single day, whipped, flogged, tortured without reason, without mercy, without end. The scars on her back told the story her voice couldn't, layers upon layers of healed wounds, some fresh, some old, some infected. A map of cruelty written on human flesh. Other slaves in the household suffered the same. Bakhita witnessed their torture. They witnessed hers. Nobody could help anyone. Speaking up meant worse punishment. Helping another slave meant punishment for both. They existed in isolated islands of suffering, surrounded by others in pain, but unable to reach each other. But physical beatings weren't enough for this master. When Bakhita is around 12 or 13, her master decides to mark his slaves permanently. The practice is called scarification, traditional in some Sudanese cultures, but here twisted into ownership branding. What happens next is torture in its purest form. A woman comes with 3 things: a dish of white flour, a dish of salt, a razor. Bakhita's mistress watches, whip in hand, making sure she doesn't move, doesn't scream too loud, doesn't resist. Resistance is futile. Resistance makes it worse. The woman uses flour to draw intricate patterns on Bakhita's skin, swirls, geometric shapes, tribal markings that mean nothing to Bakhita, everything to her owner. Proof of possession. Then she cuts deeply, following every line. Breasts, stomach, right arm. 114 patterns total. 114 deep cuts. Blood everywhere, flowing, pooling, soaking the ground beneath her. Then comes the salt, poured directly into the open wounds. The pain is beyond description, beyond anything she'd experienced, beyond anything imaginable. Bakhita later said she thought she would die, especially when they poured the salt. She prayed for death, begged for it. But death didn't come. The wounds are then filled with more flour to ensure the scars become permanent, raised, visible. A month of bleeding. A month of excruciating pain. A month of fever. A month where infection could have killed her easily. She said it was a miracle of God she survived. He had destined her for better things. Those scars would mark her body for the rest of her life. 60 years later, elderly, lying in a convent bed in Italy, those scars were still visible, still raised, still telling the story. But here's what's remarkable, what's almost impossible to understand. Bakhita never complained. Not once. She never asked why. She never cursed God. She never sought revenge. She never spoke of her torturers with hatred. Deep inside, even in that hell, she felt something, a presence, a love she couldn't name yet, a force sustaining her when she should have broken. Years later, she'd say she always felt God in her heart, even when she didn't know his name, even when she'd never heard of Jesus, even when she couldn't read or write. Something inside told her she was loved, that her life had value, that this wasn't the end of her story. Everything changes. Political shifts in Sudan. The Turkish general is forced to return to Turkey. He has to liquidate his assets. He has to sell his slaves. Bakhita is bought by an Italian consul named Callisto Legnoni. The change is immediate, shocking, disorienting. For the first time in 5 years, someone treats her with respect, with dignity, with basic human kindness. Legnoni doesn't beat her, doesn't torture her, doesn't humiliate her. He treats her like a human being. She'd forgotten that was possible. Legnoni serves in Khartoum, Sudan. Bakhita works in his household doing normal domestic tasks, but she's not beaten when she makes mistakes, not tortured for entertainment, not humiliated for sport. She's corrected gently, taught patiently. treated well. The contrast with her previous life is so stark she almost can't process it. Is this real? Will it last? Can humans actually be kind? Political instability in Sudan grows. The modest uprising is gaining strength. Khartoum becomes dangerous for foreigners. 1885, Legnoni decides to return to Italy. He's taking his household with him. Bakhita asks, almost afraid to hope, if she can go too. Legnoni agrees. That decision changes her life forever. The journey to Italy must have felt surreal, traveling freely, not in chains, not barefoot, not starving. Legnoni pays her passage, treats her with consideration. Italy, a country she'd never heard of, a culture completely foreign, a language she doesn't speak, but also freedom, distance from Sudan, distance from the nightmare. In Italy, Legnoni gives Bakhita two friends. Augusto Micheli and his wife Maria, they own a villa in Zinigo, near Murano, province of Venice. Bakhita becomes nanny to their daughter, Mimina. She's good at it. She develops genuine affection for the child. The feeling is mutual. Mimina adores her, follows her everywhere. The Michelis see Bakhita's value. They treat her kindly, but they still see her as property. As slave. Italian law doesn't recognize slavery, but that legal reality hasn't quite reached their personal thinking yet. Between 1888 and Tina Michelis travel on business. They leave Mimina and Bakhita in the care of the Canossian sisters at the Institute of Catechumens in Venice. Those months with the sisters change everything. Finally, after all those years feeling God's presence without knowing his name, Bakhita meets him, face to face. Heart to heart, the sisters treat her with warmth, with genuine love. Not the conditional kindness of masters, but the unconditional love of Christ. They teach her about Jesus, about a God who became human, about a God who suffered, about a God who was beaten, tortured, crucified, about a God who understands pain, about a God who forgives, about a God who offers eternal life. Something clicks inside Bakhita. The presence she'd always felt now has a name. Jesus. The love that sustained her through torture now has a face. Christ crucified. The hope that kept her alive now has a promise. Heaven, eternal life. Freedom forever. She attends catechism classes, learns prayers, learns the creed, learns the Our Father. Every word resonates. Our Father. She has a Father who art in heaven. A Father who never sold her. Hallowed be thy name. A name worth knowing. Thy kingdom come. A kingdom where there are no slaves. Thy will be done. A will that wants her freedom. She wants to stay. She wants to serve this God who never abandoned her. She wants to be baptized. When Maria Micheli returns from Sudan to collect her daughter and Bakhita, the young African woman does something that requires more courage than surviving slavery. She refuses to leave. Maria is shocked, offended, angry. How dare this slave refuse? Maria spends 3 days at the convent trying to persuade her. 3 days of arguments. 3 days of pressure. 3 days of threats. What will you do? Where will you go? You're nothing without us. You owe us. We saved you. Come back. Obey. Bakhita doesn't move. The sisters support her. They see her faith, her sincerity, her courage. They complain to Italian authorities on her behalf. The case goes to court. This is unprecedented. A slave suing for freedom. But is she a slave? That's the legal question. November 29, 1889, an Italian court makes a historic ruling. The British had outlawed slavery in Sudan before Bakhita's birth in 1869. Italian law never recognized slavery as legal. Therefore, legally speaking, Bakhita had never been a slave. Not in Sudan under British law, not in Italy under Italian law. She had been illegally held, illegally trafficked, illegally kept. She is free, has always been free. For the first time in her life, at age 20, Bakhita has control of her own destiny. She chooses to stay with the Canossian sisters. January 9th, 1890, the day Bakhita is reborn. She's baptized and confirmed by Cardinal Patriarch of Venice, Domenico Agostini. She receives 3 names: Josephine Margaret Fortunata, Josephine in honor of Saint Joseph, protector of the Holy Family, Margaret, possibly for Saint Margaret of Antioch, martyr, and Fortunata fortunate, blessed, the name her kidnappers gave her in mockery now transformed into prophecy. She is fortunate, she is blessed, not because of what humans did to her, but because of what God did for her. Hit subscribe now if this story is moving you. We create content about saints who suffered, saints who overcame, saints whose stories challenge comfortable Christianity. In the description, I've placed links to books about Saint Josephine Bakhita, complete with historical documentation, testimonies, and photographs. If you want the full story, if you want to understand how faith transforms suffering into sanctity, get those books. Keep watching to see what this former slave does next. 6 years after her baptism, Josephine Bakhita makes her perpetual vows. She becomes a sister of the Daughters of Charity of Saint Magdalene of Canossa, the Canossian sisters. She's 27 years old. She commits to poverty, chastity, obedience. Poverty she knows well. She's lived it most of her life. Chastity, obedience to God, not to cruel masters. She dedicates her entire life to serving God and serving others. The congregation sends her to a Canossian convent in Schio in the Veneto region. She stayed there for 51 years, until her death. At the convent, everyone calls her affectionately Sister Morena, Brown's sister, or Mother Morena. She doesn't mind. She embraces it. She serves with joy, with humility. With a smile everyone remembers. She works in the kitchen. She cleans. She sews. She cares for others. She does whatever needs doing. Eventually, she becomes the convent's doorkeeper, the porter. This role, seemingly simple, becomes her greatest ministry. RS doorkeeper Bakhita is the first person visitors meet. She welcomes everyone with warmth, with genuine love, with that smile that had survived torture. People come to the convent and leave changed, not because of what she says, though her words are kind, because of who she is. Because she radiates something they can't explain: peace, joy, forgiveness, love that costs everything and gives everything. Here's what's remarkable, what's almost impossible to believe. Bakhita said if she ever met her kidnappers, her torturers, the people who carved her skin and beat her daily for 3 years, she would kiss their hands. She would kneel. She would thank them, because without that suffering, she never would have known Christ. Without being kidnapped from Sudan, she never would have reached Italy. Without being sold to the Turkish general, she never would have been sold to the Italian consul. Without all that pain, she never would have met Jesus. Without slavery, she never would have found freedom. Think about that. 114 scars on her body, 12 years of slavery, over 1,000 days of beatings, unspeakable torture, trauma that would destroy most people. And her response: gratitude, not bitterness, not revenge fantasies, not hatred. Gratitude, because she understood something most people never grasp, something that takes a lifetime of prayer to understand. God can take the worst evil and turn it into the greatest good. He doesn't corset. Free will, sin, cruelty, but God can redeem it, transform it, use it, bring life from death, hope from despair, saints from slaves. Later in life, when her to bed, people would visit, pilgrims, locals, children, adults. Everyone wanted to see Sister Morena. Everyone wanted her blessing. They'd ask how she was doing. Her answer never changed. She'd smile, that same smile that survived everything, and say, "As my master wishes, come il padroni vuol." She'd refer to God respectfully as my master, il padroni. Naught vis, fear not with resentment. Not with the trauma of slavery. Vis love, with total trust, with complete surrender. The woman who'd been a slave to cruel humans became a willing servant to a loving God. The difference, everything. February 8th, 1947, Josephine Bakhita dies in Schio, Italy. She's 78 years old. She's been a Canossian sister for 51 years. She's spent 62 years in Italy, more than 3 times longer than her 12 years of slavery. She dies peacefully, surrounded by sisters who love her, in a place she chose freely, serving a master she chose freely. Her last words echo her life, complete surrender to God's will. Our Lady, she whispers, then silence. Then heaven, but death isn't the end of Bakhita's story. It's the beginning of her universal mission. News of her death spreads. Thousands attend her funeral. People who knew her. People who'd heard of her. People who'd been touched by her smile, her prayers, her presence. They call her a saint before the church does. They ask her intercession, pray to her. Report favors, report miracles. The Vatican opens her cause for canonization, investigates her life, collects testimony, examines her writings, studies her heroic virtue. May 17th, 1992, Pope John Paul II beatifies her. She's now Blessed Josephine Bakhita. One step from sainthood, just needs one confirmed miracle. 10 days later, the miracle happens. Santos, São Paulo, Brazil. A woman named Eva da Costa, suffering from diabetes, faces a nightmare. Wounds on her legs won't heal. Doctors try everything. Infection nothing spreads. Amputation is scheduled. She's going to lose her leg, maybe both legs. Eva is desperate. Someone gives her a prayer card. Blessed Josephine Bakhita. Eva reads the story. African slave, torture, scars, suffering, faith, freedom, forgiveness. Something resonates. Eva starts praying. Blessed Josephine, you suffered. You understand pain. You understand hopelessness. Please intercede for me. Let me keep my leg. The wounds heal inexplicably, completely. Doctors rapidly. Are baffled. There's no medical explanation. The tissue was dying. Now it's healthy. The infection was spreading. Now it's gone. Impossible. Unless the Vatican investigates, medical records examined, doctors interviewed, timelines studied. The conclusion, scientifically inexplicable, medically impossible. A clear miracle authentique through Bakhita's intercession. October 1st, 2000, St. Peter's Square, Vatican City. Pope John Paul II canonizes Josephine Bakhita. She's declared a saint of the Universal Catholic Church. The ceremony is magnificent. Thousands attend. Sudanese delegation present. Italian faithful, African bishops, religious communities, cardinals, people who knew her in Schio, now elderly, everyone celebrating. An African slave girl is now officially recognized as a saint. Her body rests in a glass reliquary in the Canossian Institute in Schio, Italy, where pilgrims visit daily to honor her memory, see her scars, seek her intercession. Saint Josephine Bakhita is now the patron saint of Sudan and of victims of human trafficking. Her feast day is February 8th, the anniversary of her death. Every year on that day, Catholics around the world remember the slave who became a saint, the girl whose name was stolen, who received a new name from God, the woman who suffered unimaginable cruelty, who responded with unimaginable love. February 10th, 1993, Pope John Paul II spoke about Bakhita during a visit to Sudan. His words capture her legacy perfectly. Rejoice, all of Africa. Bakhita has returned to you. The daughter of Sudan sold as a slave, sold as living merchandise, and yet remaining free. Free with the freedom of the saints. That's the heart of Bakhita's story. They could enslave her body. They couldn't enslave her soul. They could beat her. They couldn't break her spirit. They could carve her skin. They couldn't touch what mattered most. She remained free, free with the freedom only God gives. In a world still plagued by human trafficking, by modern slavery, by exploitation of the vulnerable, Saint Josephine Bakhita stands as proof that evil doesn't get the last word. She's hope for every victim. She's evidence that healing is possible, that forgiveness is possible, that transformation is possible, that sanctity is possible even from the worst circumstances. She's living proof that God can take a life meant for destruction and turn it into a testimony that inspires millions. If Bakhita's story moved you, do this. Share this video. Someone in your life needs to hear that suffering doesn't have to destroy you, that forgiveness is more powerful than revenge, that God never abandons us, even when humans betray us in the worst ways. Check the description for books on Saint Josephine Bakhita with full historical documentation, photographs of her scars, and testimonies from those who knew her. Subscribe for more saints whose stories challenge, inspire, and transform. February 8th Feast of Saint Josephine Bakhita. Saint Josephine Bakhita, patron of human trafficking victims, pray for us